But before we get into Robert, I would like to just take a minute and let you know what Webcast Friday is and who we are. My name is Chris Armstrong, and I'm the Multimedia Manager at InterWorks. InterWorks is a people-focused technology consulting agency based in Stillwater, Oklahoma. We have offices all around the world, including Oklahoma City, Tulsa, Chicago, New York City, San Francisco, London, Christchurch, Germany, and the Netherlands. Webcast Fridays are 30-ish minute presentations that show off some of the more interesting work that we do, and we hope that you find it both informative and inspiring. Webcast Fridays happen every other Friday, and you can find our future ones at our website, interworks.com/events. That's it for me, so Robert, take it away.
Thanks, Chris. And I just wanted to check for a moment that you're recording. For those that are attending, this will be recorded and available later. If you want to forward this to anyone else who you think might be interested in this presentation. Thanks, everybody, for coming on. I see a lot of familiar names that I know from various Tableau events and communication online. For many of you, I know that Tableau is nothing new. You've been using it for a while, you know all about what it is, and are probably quite excited about it, as I am. And for those folks in that category, what you'll see today is maybe just some ideas that you can borrow from. But I've found that many in the financial community are still fairly new to Tableau, or may have it and aren't quite sure what to do with it, or are still doing a lot of reporting in Excel and may not be getting the most value out of what you can do with Tableau. So I'd like to start by talking about that value proposition. What is visual analytics? Why is it valuable to visualize your data and make it interactive instead of maybe a more typical Excel reporting process or something of that nature? We'll also walk through some examples, some dashboards that help you compare against KPIs, look at things versus a prior period, your plan, your budget, all of those sorts of very common financial reporting tasks where you're just comparing something versus some other value. We'll look at some ways that you can do that might help you get the creative juices flowing. And I also want to talk about checking data quality. One of my very first dashboards when I started working with Tableau was to help me, as someone deeply involved in the financial reporting process, to check data quality, make sure that the information that was going into other dashboards and roll-up reports month after month was something that we could trust. So I'll show that example here towards the end. So first, why is visual analytics valuable, and what is it? Well, it's encoding data with visual elements so that you can share it in more meaningful and insightful ways to create more informative visualizations, and really just leverage the power of our visual processing capabilities to get more out of your data. So I'll start with a very simple example that you may or may not have seen before. It's a grid of numbers, and you might imagine this as a set of rows and columns on an Excel spreadsheet. But for this exercise, it's just the digits 1 through 9. And I'll give you a couple of seconds to see if you can pick out all of the instances of the number 9. We might think of this number 9 as a data quality issue, or just something that we're trying to measure because it's important to the business. Go ahead and see how many you can find. So my guess is not very many, or you find it difficult. Now, to demonstrate just the very simple value of visual encoding, we're going to do something very easy. Just change the color of those 9s to red. This is something that you do all the time on spreadsheets, is that you will use conditional formatting to highlight a cell according to some particular rule. And this does make things easier to spot, easier to count, but it does have some limitations that we'll talk about. But just out of the gate, you can see how one simple visual encoding method can help you more quickly and more effectively answer a question about data. Other kinds of visual encoding that you'll come across are orientation, length, size, shape, position. All of these that you see here are called pre-attentive visual attributes because they're things that our brains can process before our system 2 or slow analytical thinking processes kick in. We can identify the outliers or the relationships, the relative length, relative size of things visually much faster than we can if we're scanning across a table of numbers. So if we were to apply some of those concepts to our original problem and encode these by size of a bar, in addition to color, we now can make another comparison, which is an order of magnitude versus its peers. So we see now that not only are there 10 instances of the digit 9, but that occurs far less often in that grid than anything else. And maybe that's an interesting question. Now let's apply this to something a little bit more real world. Let's say that you are interested in answering some questions about a coffee chain. You want to know things like which product type has the highest profit, which state has the highest budgeted profit, and what percent is over budget. How has that changed over time? Things like this. So in a typical just rows and columns kind of way, those questions can be answered, but they might take a lot of formula manipulation and or a lot of time scanning through a table to compare the value in one region to the value in another. And if you have a lot, your brain can end up finding it hard to store enough information to compare those values one against the other. So it's inefficient. If we use visual analytics, the process is far more efficient. So just one question, which product type has the highest profit? We encode that as a bar chart. So far, I think these are very simple examples. You might be thinking, yeah, well, that's why we build charts in Excel, right? Well, I want to show you some examples that take it far beyond that, because it's not just about encoding data visually, it's about enabling you to ask more and more questions, because as you see those things in the chart, that prompts a question. And you want to be able to answer that question, ideally without a lot of extra work to manipulate the spreadsheet or build additional charts. So we'll go through some examples of some financial type reports that I find are very common in my consulting practice with InterWorks. First, we'll talk about comparing values to KPIs. And I'm going to switch over to an interactive example of this dashboard. So this is an example of a business that needs a high-level overview of multiple business units who are each measuring against different kinds of targets. Maybe they're looking at reliability or customer satisfaction or shipping rates or web analytics, and they want to see a big picture, who's hitting their KPIs, who's not, how has that changed over time. So we have that in a chart where we can look at the latest value versus its target and see, okay, well, it's red, which means we're not hitting the KPI. It's blue, which means that we are. And sometimes there are no targets set. Sometimes the goal is simply it needs to go up every time. And that's where the trend lines can be especially necessary to have next to what you might consider a normal kind of reporting method, right? Either a stoplight chart or your red, yellow, green cells in a table. Adding the trend next to that shows you Not only are we hitting the target now, but how has that been over time? So if we look at customer service and the number of cases resolved in one day here, we see that, well, over the several quarters, it didn't meet target, but over the last 2 quarters, it has. If that situation were reversed, we might see, well, okay, they're down this quarter, but they've been doing pretty well, and they're only down a little bit below KPI. Things like that are questions that you can answer with visual encoding like this, and you can do it very quickly. But the value that Tableau adds on top of that is that this can all be very dynamic. We have this mantra in the data visualization world, I think it's called Snyderman's mantra, that says start with a summary, then zoom and filter and get details on demand. So this would be your summary view. And then let's say that I'm in charge of development and I want to see details about just my division because I'm the division manager or VP of development. Well, as soon as I click on that and decide to view the next level down, this level 1, well, now I can see the subdivisions of that business unit. Or I can send this over to another manager and find their divisions and subdivisions as well. So in one view, we have several things that you can dynamically ask and answer questions about high-level business units, lower-level business units, and so on. And that details on demand part would be something like, well, let's say that I wanted to see details about this reliability ratio. Well, we can pop up a special box down here at the bottom that gives you more details about how that metric is defined, a little bit more visibility over how it's changed over time. Let's find a different example here. Let's look at customer cases resolved in one day. We can also show that against the target line. So yes, we're above target, but by how much? And this tells us that answer. It also allows us to drill down even further toward a dashboard that is specifically designed to give you details about that metric for that business group. So if you want to find out more about this particular dashboard, you can go grab yourself a copy of the Big Book of Dashboards. This one's talked about in Chapter 8. I highly recommend that book. The folks that wrote it, Steve Wexler, Jeffrey Schaefer, and Andy Cotgreave. Andy runs the Zen Master program, and the other two are Zen Masters of Tableau. And that book is chock full of dashboard examples that I keep on my desk for inspiration and ideas. And I think you'll find it useful for that as well. So here's another idea that I'd like to show you just quickly. And I'll bring up an online version of that to talk through. So here we're looking at financial metrics, not versus a KPI, but just simply versus the prior year. And I'll pick revenue to measure. We see the overview right off the bat and how that's changed year over year, but we also see some details about the trend month to month and that versus last year. But now we have some additional questions. We see some red bars that tells us, okay, we're below target in these regions and in these product categories. We want to find out why. So actually, let me go back to revenue here. I want to find out why. We'll stick with new net money. There's something weird going on in the portal. Why is the Northeast below target? Well, I can click on the Northeast and now find out, well, there's a particular product categories here that are more significantly below target, so variable annuities and brokerage. Let me click on variable annuities. And now within that category, I can see the details. Again, how have things changed over time? But also the particular financial advisors responsible for that category. Now in just a few clicks, with a dynamic dashboard, not with a lot of spreadsheet manipulation, I've drilled into the person that I might need to call to find out what's going on in that product category and in that region. Now, all the dashboards that we've talked about so far, I think are well designed. They look great. They're the kinds of things that you might build if you have been working with Tableau for a good long while. I'll skip this next example, and I'd like to get into an example of how I got started with Tableau. So I'll just set the stage for this a little bit. I was working as an engineer in asset management, and part of our job, was to support the monthly reporting process on capital and O&M projects that were planned to spend some kind of money over the next 5 years. And we had a fairly large project portfolio. For just one facility, we might have 300 projects. Later, when I moved up to headquarters, I was looking at data quality for these financial projections on almost 1,000 projects. So every month, we would have to look through that list, find things where our estimated spend has changed from what we thought it would be last month, and what we reported up through the chain, the previous projection cycle, and why they're different. Well, oftentimes, the end of year and total project projections were different because of something legitimate. Well, it cost more, or we know that it's going to cost less as we continue on with the project. But also very often, possibly as much as half the time, the answer was, well, it wasn't updated correctly, or we missed something in the projection process where it was just a data quality issue. And what we ended up reporting and entering into the system did not accurately reflect our current best estimate of that project. As you can imagine, that's a problem. It's more of a problem on large projects than small, but things add up. So my job involved, when I first got it, looking through spreadsheets like this. Not unlike the kinds of things that we talked about in the very first part of this webinar, where we just have rows and columns of numbers. And we might be using some visual formatting to highlight things that have changed significantly from one month to the next. But you can see there are a lot of highlights here, and this spreadsheet doesn't quickly tell me why it's up or down, or even if that's likely to be correct. I needed something else to help me dig into the details of how these things have changed over time, who's responsible for updating these numbers, and really just, do they make sense? So I started using Tableau about 7 years ago, so I'm going to show you a dashboard now that looks not quite as good as the dashboards that I would make today, but still I think okay. And I show you this I just point that out to say that everyone starts somewhere. We like to show nice, clean, polished demos on our Tableau public accounts and Twitter accounts. But you know, just having a functional dashboard is where all the value is, especially if you're an individual analyst just trying to check data quality like I was. So this example that's up on the screen, obviously I have to have project names and details about what these things are pixelated. But this red box over here on the left that I've highlighted is one particular project whose estimate changed a fair amount from one month to the next. And we wanted to know why. We wanted to know something about the history of our project projections, our estimated end of year and total project values, and some other key things. Who's responsible for it? Who do I need to call if I have questions? This chart up here on the top right, let me see if I can annotate this here. So this one that you see here is just looking at our end of year projection and how that has changed from one month to the next. So in July, we thought it would be 285K. And then as time marched on, fast forward to May of 2013, we thought it was going to be 470K. Well, somewhere in the middle of that, January of 2013, when the year rolled over, that estimate dropped precipitously to 152K. So you can imagine what that January reporting cycle might have looked like. Oh, great. We have hundreds of thousands of dollars more that we can spend on something else, because we've said that this project isn't going to spend as much money as maybe we previously thought. But looking at it visually like this, you can tell, well, actually what that line should be is something more like this, that just goes up and then goes straight across. And so just simply taking it from a spreadsheet to a line chart, we see that and we know that's an anomaly. That's an anomaly that we need to investigate and correct before the reporting cycle closes. A way that we could investigate that, well, there are a couple of things. You can see here that I have this gray band on the total project amount. Well, that gray band represents what is the total amount approved to spend on that project. And we kind of expect things to stay within that gray band. So as soon as they drop out of it, you say, well, something is probably wrong. And certainly if it goes above the gray band, something is very wrong. We're going to need to approve more money. And that's something that we need to call out very quickly. Now, let's say, though, that we also need to see monthly cash flow. So right now, the axis along the bottom looking at time is just the total amount that we plan to spend for a project on any given day, any given reporting cycle. But it's also useful to see, well, how much are we going to spend in February or March or April? And when we look at this January 13, we see that, well, that precipitous decline is because some money came in or something changed in the system in the month of March that we didn't catch. We need to edit that particular value in that particular month. And we can use more visual encoding there to highlight green and red as things change from month to month. All of those just giving you details on demand to help you dig into data quality issues, know who to talk to. And sometimes there are some established rules, like for instance, this example project was one where, well, the numbers just hadn't been touched in the system for over a month. And so just by some simple date logic, we can see, well, all right, we can automatically flag that issue as not updated. And we can have some reporting around that. So all that to say, this was a way that I as an individual and you as an individual could use Tableau to really, really dig into the details of your data, do it quickly, and hopefully find as many data quality issues as you can surface in the very short amount of time that you might have to run through your reporting cycle. So if you are new to Tableau or even a veteran and you just love to collect books on the subject, this is one I highly recommend in addition to the big book of dashboards I mentioned before. Tableau Your Data, written by Dan Murray. He is our director of BI services and former Tableau Zen master and just all around great guy, really smart, knowledgeable with Tableau. It's a very good volume that covers Tableau Desktop, Tableau Server. There's reference material in the back, and there's also some good talk about visual best practices, the right way to go about designing data visualizations. And if you have more specific things that you'd like to know about Tableau, we have more examples like the ones that I showed you on our website. You can follow our blog, you can look at our Viz gallery, and that's also where you can find my contact information. You're welcome to reach out to me on Twitter. My handle is @BibleViz. And if you're going to Tableau Conference this year in Las Vegas, I will be giving a presentation on getting the most value out of your data. It's called Data Billionaires, Maximizing Returns from Data Investments. So I encourage you to check out that session, favorite it if you're interested in going, and let others know about it. Or just stop by outside and say hi. And I'm looking forward to seeing you in Las Vegas. And if you have any questions, we have a few minutes left over, so I'll stop there and open it up.